In my previous videos, I presented irrefutable evidence of life after death and explained where we go after it. I also explained what dreams really are and showed the tragic consequences that befall those who commit suicide after death. I also presented several of the many NDE stories I've gathered over more than 20 years of researching the phenomenon of death and life beyond the material body. If you haven't watched them yet, I encourage you to click on my channel name in the video tab to view all the films I've created so far. In this episode, I will present another NDE story from my collection. This is a tale of a staunch communist who, after experiencing clinical death, changed his mind about life after the material body's death. Let's begin.
My grandfather, Marion, was deeply involved in politics. You could say that politics was his whole life. During the communist regime in Poland, he was a party activist. Some people joined the party just to make their lives easier during those difficult times. My grandfather likely had the same goal to some extent, but even after communism collapsed, he remained loyal to his political ideals. His views were passed down first to my father, and then to me, already during high school. Grandfather deeply believed that the Communist Party was the only path to a better future. He was a man unafraid of challenges, and his zeal and dedication to the cause were unmatched. His home was filled with party books and newspapers. He sincerely hated the activists of the Polish underground solidarity movement and the Catholic Church, considering them the main enemies of the People's Republic of Poland. In his eyes, they were traitors and saboteurs, waiting to destroy what had been built with so much effort. I grew up listening to his stories about political struggles, party meetings, and discussions that lasted late into the night. I was fascinated by his tales and adopted his views almost without question. Grandfather had incredible charisma, and his confidence was contagious. I felt proud to have such a grandfather and wanted to be just like him. However, everything changed one day, a day I will never forget. It was an ordinary evening, and as usual, we were sitting in front of the TV watching a political program. Grandfather, with a glass of cognac in hand, was carefully following every movement and word. At one point, the face of one of the politicians he hated the most appeared on the screen. The debate began, and Grandfather started getting increasingly agitated. His face turned red and his hands began to tremble. At one point, he suddenly stood up, shouting various profanities, and then abruptly slumped back into the chair. It was a heart attack. We immediately called an ambulance. Fortunately, it arrived very quickly, and the doctor managed to save Grandfather, although for a moment, his vital functions had already stopped. He was taken to the hospital, where he stayed for a few days. When Grandfather finally returned home, something had changed in him. He was not only physically weaker, but also mentally calmer. He was much more peaceful than before. He almost completely lost interest in politics. It seemed as if his entire former life had suddenly lost its meaning. His gaze softened and the old harshness disappeared. He began spending more time on simple pleasures, walks, reading books, and chatting with neighbors. His transformation was extraordinary, and it deeply moved me. One day, while sitting on a bench in the garden, Grandfather told me what exactly had happened to him during the heart attack. He said to me, "You know, grandson, sometimes in life, things happen that force us to reflect. I fought all my life, thinking I was right, that I knew what was best. But when I was lying in the hospital, I started to wonder if all of it was really worth it. The politics, the hatred, the constant struggle." His words were a huge surprise. I had always thought that Grandfather was unyielding, that his beliefs were unwavering. And yet here, in front of me, sat a man who had undergone a profound transformation. He started talking about the need for understanding and respect for others, even for those we disagree with. His former enemies were no longer demons, but people with their own beliefs and stories. But the biggest shock came when Grandfather started speaking about life after death. He had always sincerely hated the church and pretty much any other religion. He was 100% atheist who considered followers of any religion to be ignorant. While I could understand his desire for a calmer lifestyle after the heart attack, I could not comprehend this miraculous conversion. Regarding religion, I had exactly the same views as he did, so I couldn't understand what had happened that had influenced him so deeply. Grandfather clearly wanted to tell me something, but I could see he was hesitant. He wanted to get something off his chest, but he was probably afraid of my reaction. Finally, he blurted out that during the heart attack, he had died and left his body. He said that he floated near the ceiling and clearly saw everything that was happening. He already had significant vision problems, but at that moment, he saw everything not only with perfect clarity, but also in a completely different way, as if from all angles at once. And not only did his sight improve, but overall, he felt excellent. All his nervousness completely disappeared. He calmly observed the entire situation. Then he thought that his views on life after death might have been wrong all along. He started wondering if he still existed, maybe God exists too. Maybe all those religions are right. And if so, which one is the correct one? As he pondered this, he suddenly heard a powerful male voice that told him, "Don't ask which God to choose because God is everything that exists." After hearing these words, he experienced a kind of enlightenment. He felt that everything is interconnected and that the supposed separateness exists only here on Earth. He said this enlightenment was so overwhelming that it exceeded him. It wasn't just dry information he heard. He deeply felt and understood it. He kept telling himself how blind I was. Then, he began to recall his entire life, literally every moment, and he relived it again. Having experienced this feeling of unity with everything, he couldn't believe that his earthly life had been the way it was. He told me that living here, we have no idea how to live, which is why we make thousands of mistakes. He added that if he had this knowledge from birth, he would have led his life completely differently. I must admit I had enough of the conversation at that point. Luckily, Grandma called us for dinner. Growing up under his strong influence, it was a difficult lesson. I learned that life is full of unexpected twists, and that our deepest beliefs can change because of experiences we can't predict. As for his spiritual experiences, if they were enough to change his beliefs, it means they were surely real. I must admit, after hearing his story, I changed too. I relaxed a bit about politics and started thinking more about life after death and spirituality. Grandfather shared this story with the whole family, and I think only my father wasn't shaken by it. Everyone else saw, as I did, that if this experience could break down the mental barrier Grandfather had, it meant that something extraordinary must have really happened to him. But then again, my father has always been a tough, thick-skinned guy, so such stories don't move him. Or who knows, maybe it affected him, but he didn't want to admit it. When Grandfather passed away 2 years later in the hospital, the clock in my room stopped exactly at the time of his death. I think Grandfather wanted to send me a sign confirming that his story was true.
And here we have another NDE story that provides us with knowledge about life after the death of the material body. It contains many elements worth paying attention to. The feeling of unity our protagonist experienced was very important. By experiencing unity with everything that exists, he also experienced unity with the primordial source. This profoundly changed him. We also clearly see how political fanaticism can blind a person and prevent them from gaining knowledge about the reality around us. Speaking of knowledge, I strongly encourage you to check out my publication. I've included all the knowledge about life beyond the material body that I've gathered over more than 20 years of research and personal experiences. The link to purchase it is in the description below the video. You'll also find my email address, where you can send your own NDE experiences or other stories related to spirituality. That's all for today. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.